massive protests with thousands and thousands of people, and all of a sudden they become their own celebrities in that sense, because they know how to organize, they know how to get their points across. And it might not be obviously you can't have them writing the policies that are going to be passed by government at this stage in their careers, but they will grow, they will learn from their mistakes just like everybody will. And I think seeing them less like activists and more like human beings trying to fight for the change they believe in drastically changes your opinion about what they're trying to do. Because if you look at the changes they are directly advocating for, then you realize that these are changes that are good.
So what are some of those changes?
I think it falls under two categories. So the first one is climate justice, and the other one is lowering greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll start with climate justice. So climate justice just implies that climate change is going to disproportionately affect people who are marginalized and people who don't contribute a lot to the problem, and people who are probably in poor regions, and people who are minorities, and all these things. So the fact is that if the world keeps going as it is, countries like this or people like this are going to suffer the most. So let me just give an example right now. China and the USA, they account for a lot more emissions, almost 50 times the amount of emissions as the whole of Africa accounts for. Like, just think about that. They've, over the span of their country's existence, they've generated a lot more carbon emissions. So if you're looking at whose fault is it, you can say that they have a lot more blame in it because they emitted more. But obviously, those countries are a lot further advanced in terms of development than any African country at this point. So because the fact that they're advanced and they have like infrastructure that has been set up, and they have like a government system that works relatively well as compared to African nations, they can respond a lot quicker to climate events. Basically, if a drought happens in a part in the USA, people won't starve and die. But let's come back to a country like Nigeria now that has contributed a lot less to climate change. And let's say a drought happens in a local village somewhere, I don't know, in Borno or wherever. People will probably die just because of, I don't know, rain didn't fall for a year. They don't have a lot of money. They didn't do anything. Like, at most, let's say they have like lanterns and they have like a small generator they turn on a few times. These people have done nothing almost to contribute to global emissions. But globally around the world, it is people like these that will suffer the most. And this is just the reality of it. I'm sorry if the example is a bit too grim, but this is really the core of the argument when they say climate justice. It's the fact that you have companies like Shell, like Chevron, who have been operating in Nigeria for years and years and years and years. They've made massive profits from their oil and gas operations. But if you look at the communities where they operate in, these people are, every day they have to breathe in bad air because they're living next to their processing facilities. Their rivers and their fishing business has been destroyed because of the oil spillage in the region. There are militants in the region because of there are a lot of reasons. But if you look at the communities that are generating so much money, not just for Nigeria, but for a lot of international companies, just look at where they are right now. They don't enjoy the benefits of all the profits that's come from years and years of oil and gas exploitation. And this trend is repeated in so many places around the world, where the people who contributed the least to a problem are the people who are going to suffer the most. And historically, they have suffered the most. And these are just like small scales. But when you're talking about like the effects of climate change, these are much bigger scales. This is about a lake in a village community completely disappearing. This is about sea level rising. This is about property getting damaged. This is about flooding. Like, all these things, they are going to affect the people who don't have the financial means to correct them the most. And that is the first core of the argument. And the second core of what I think the argument is lowering greenhouse gas emissions. Like, historically around the world, there are just a few companies that are responsible for a majority of the greenhouse gas emissions, and these are companies that in heavy oil and gas activity, in heavy manufacturing activity, in operations that involve a lot of farming and raising of farm animals for meat consumption. Like, these ones produce a lot more emissions than the rest of the world, but they would say that they're only doing these things because they're trying to meet demand. Like, there's a demand for their products, and so they have to like produce. They have to raise cows because people like beef. They have to raise pigs for people like pork. They have to raise a lot of chickens for people like chicken. They have to produce a lot of fossil fuels because people like to drive their cars and leave their lights on, like all these things. So really addressing these two things in a creative way, because you have to look at it that these two these two problems that I've identified, climate justice and lowering greenhouse gas emissions, they are not problems that you can just walk in one day and like flip a switch and like everything is taken care of. It's something that requires a lot of systematic change. And the problem with systematic change is that it involves you affecting a lot of things. And I think that's just the reality right now. So how do you make all these changes in a way that, number one, addresses the most impacted first, the people who don't have a voice, the people who get affected the most? How do you make the changes where those people are not worse off, but at least they get some benefits from the changes? And how do you make sure that the future systems are so resilient that you don't fall back to where they were before? So that's really how a good way to think about it. Like, that is, I feel that most of what they do is very, very important. Obviously, there are some tactics that I personally don't agree with, and most people are just doing it because it's just a really nice trend. You post Instagram pictures, but whatever. People have different motivations for doing things. Like, I can't really point that out as a problem, but that is just the reality on ground. But the core message that they're trying to pass across is an important one, and it's a relevant one, from my opinion.
Finally, I want to ask what you think, in your honest opinion, is the best way to get around this, the best ideas to solve these problems I've identified. Because I see that some people suggest that we sort of fly less, we drive less, and and waste certain things less. But again, behind that, I see that one is quite not feasible in a sense. I mean, it's really, because even those people themselves, those who are suggesting that we fly less, the next day I see them taking the flights just from just a short distance. So they are not even keeping their own commandments and rules. So again, I see that nations, when they come together, we think about the France Accord, the Copenhagen Accord, they can't keep these rules they set for themselves. So in the end, some of them, walk out of the agreement. So looking at the whole difficulty in the political realm, how activists are going about investigation, what do you think is the best way to get around this, and what do you think is the best solution?
Well, if I could answer that question directly, I'll probably be about $2 trillion which I are right now.
I mean, maybe finally you'll get that job.
Yeah. So it's a complex. It's not going to be one thing. I think the first thing you need to realize is that there's no one silver bullet. There's no one killer policy that's going to like fix all the problems in one day. And just realistically, people won't change their habits. Like, people want to be comfortable. Like, who doesn't want to have electricity in their homes 24 hours a day? Who doesn't want to have like a transportation system that they can work and rely on and they don't have to worry about? Who doesn't want to have like fancy things in their lives? Who doesn't want to travel abroad every now and then? Like, these things that people won't stop wanting. It's just not realistic. And if you look at just on a global scale, that so many people around the world are still living in poverty and they can't even afford these basic things, all these things that I just mentioned. It's very much a luxury to some people, and that's just the reality. So how do we create opportunities where people feel like they're not being taken advantage of and they're not being forgotten? It's a difficult one, but I think one of the key things is for people to really understand that their decisions affects things on a global scale, and that might not necessarily mean that everybody needs to stop eating meat or stop flying, because obviously, like I said, people are not going to change their decisions.
I wouldn't be a vegetarian.
Exactly.
I published a news last year on my website about there was this whole we need to stop or reduce our eating of meat and all that. I was like, no, personally, I'm not going to be a vegetarian to save the earth. So.
Yeah. And so many other people have that same train of thought. So I think that, like I mentioned before, when I was talking about the whole solar home system thing, meeting people where they are in the conversation and not trying to like change. I think most of the time people try to like change someone's mind. I think that's a very wrong approach. Meet people where they are. Like, most people want to live a better life. If I come to you and I tell you, if you live in Lagos, for instance, and I tell you that, um, the air quality in Lagos is very bad. Yes, like that is a fact. Like that is just a fact. Like it's because a lot of cars on the road, and there are a lot of problems around that. Like, or if I come to you and tell you that, it's not so nice not having electricity in your home for 12 hours a day. Like, yes, like that is a fact. That is something that people obviously want to address. So if you can identify problems that meet people where they are, and then propose solutions that already coincides with their habits, you're not asking them to change their habits. You're not telling them to do this or not do that. You're just telling them that, there's a better way that you can do things that will save you money. You don't even have to mention like the climate change argument, because it doesn't really mean so much to them. And that is where technology needs to go. A lot of clean technology has to follow that pathway. It needs to be something that is just better for them, because people will make good decisions if it comes to like what benefits them. People want to save money. People want to have good health for their children. People want these things. So I think just finding a way to communicate things and having technology really flow in that direction, where it is meeting immediate needs of communities and not like hypothetical problems, and not trying to force people to change their habits. I think that'll have a lot more impact on the long run than just having a fancy solution you want to push on people's throats. I think that has been a very wrong approach over the last few years.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
I'm glad I could help. Thank you so much, Manuel. I really enjoyed this conversation. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, I'm trying my best.